Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you to this episode of Mahabharat. This version of Mahabharat is the translated version of Ved Vyas Mahabharat by Kisari Mohan Ganguli. Keeping in mind the fidelity of the text provided in the translation, this is an honest attempt to share the version with the listeners. The high soul Vyasa composed 300 parvas, of which the above is only an abridgment, having distributed them into 18. The son of Sutta recited them consecutively in the forest of Nemisha as follows. In the Adiparva, as contained Pausha, Poloma, Astika, Adivansavatra, Samva, the burning of the house of Lak, the slaying of Hidimba, the destruction of the Asura Vaka, Chitrarath, the Swamvar of Draupadi, her marriage after the overthrow of rivals in war, the arrival of Vidur, the restoration of Arjuna's exile, the abduction of Subhadra, the gift and receipt of the marriage doers, the burning of the Khanda forest, the meeting with the Asura architect Maya. The Pausha Parva treats of the greatness of Utanka and the Poluma of the sons of Bhrigu. The Astika describes the birth of Garuda and of the Nagas or the snakes, the churning of the ocean, the incidents relating to the birth of the celestial steed Uttashrava, and finally the dynasty of Bharat, as described in the snake sacrifice of the king Janmejay. Sambhava Parva narrates the birth of various kings and heroes and that of the sage Krishna Dwaipayan. The partial incarnation of deities, the generation of Danavas and Yakshas of great prowess and serpents, Gandharvas, birds, and of all creatures, and lastly, of the life and adventures of King Bharat, the progenitor of the lion that goes by this name. The son born of Shakuntala in the hermitage of ascetic Kanva. This parva also describes the greatness of Bhagirathi and the births of the Vasus in the house of Shantanu and their accession to heaven. In this parva is also narrated the birth of Bhishma, uniting in him portions of the energies of the other Vasus. His renunciation of royalty and adoption of the brahmacharya mode of life, his adherence to his vows, his protection of Chitrangada, and after the death of Chitrangada, his protection of his younger brother Vichitravira, and his placing the latter on the throne. The birth of Dharma among men in consequence of the curse of Animodeva, the birth of Dhritarashtra and Pandu through the progeny of Vyasa's blessings, potency of Vyasa's blessings, and also the birth of the Pandavas. The plottings of Duryodhan to send the sons of Pandu to Vranavat and the other dark counsels of the son of Dhritarashtra in regard to the Pandavas. Then the advice administered to Yudhishthir on his way by the well-wisher of the Pandavas, Vidur, in the Malicha language, the digging of the hole, the burning of Purochan, and the sleeping woman in the flower caste, with the 5 sons in the house of Lak, the meeting of the Pandavas in the dreadful forest with Hidimba, and the slaying of her brother Hidimb by Bhima of great prowess. The birth of Ghatotkach, the meeting of the Pandavas with Vyasa, and in accordance with his advice, their stay in disguise in the house of a Brahmin in the city of Ekachakra. The destruction of Asura Vaka and the amazement of the populace at the site. The extraordinary births of Krishna and Drishtabdamnu. The departure of the Pandavas for Panchal in obedience to the injunctions of Vyasa, and moved equally by the desire of winning the hand of Draupadi on learning the tidings of the Swamvara from the lips of the Brahmin. Victory of Arjun over a Gandharva called Angarapana on the banks of Bhagirathi, his contraction of friendship with his adversary, and his hearing from the Gandharva the history of Tapti, Vashishta, and Aurava. This parva treats of the journey of the Pandavas towards Panchal, the acquisition of Draupadi in the midst of all the Rajas by Arjun and having successfully pierced the mark, and in the ensuing fight. The defeat of Shalya, Kama, and all the other crowned heads at the hands of Bhima and Arjuna of great prowess. The ascertainment by Balarama and Krishna at the sight of these matchless exploits that the heroes were the Pandavas, and the arrival of the brothers at the house of the potter where the Pandavas were staying. The dejection of Draupadi on learning that Draupadi was to be wedded to 5 husbands. The wonderful story of the 5 Indras related in consequence. The extraordinary and divinely ordained wedding of Draupadi. The sending of Vidur by the sons of Dhritarashtra as envoy to the Pandavas. The arrival of Vidur and his side to Krishna. The abode of Pandavas in Khandavprastha, and then their rule over one half of the kingdom. The fixing of turns by the son of Pandu, in obedience to the injunction of Narad, for connubial companionship with Krishna. In the like manner hath the history of Sunda and Upasunda been recited in this. This parva then treats of the departure of Arjun for the forest according to the vow, he having seen Draupadi and Yudhishthir sitting together as he entered the chambers to take out arms for delivering the kine of a certain Brahmin. This parva then describes Arjuna's meeting on the way with Ulupi, the daughter of a Naga serpent. Then it then relates his visit to several sacred spots, the birth of Vabhavu Vahara, the deliverance by Arjuna of the 5 celestial damsels who had been turned into allegory by the imprecation of a Brahmin. The meeting of Madhava and Arjun on the holy spot called Prabhasa, the carrying away of Subhadra by Arjun, incited thereto by her brother Krishna, in the wonderful car moving on land and water, and through mid-air, according to the wish of the rider. The departure for Indraprastha with the doer, the conception in the womb of Subhadra of that progeny of prowess, Abhimanyu. Yagnaseni's giving birth to children. Then follows the pleasure trip of Krishna and Arjun to the banks of Yamuna and the acquisition by them of the discus and the celebrated bow Gandiva. The burning of the forest of Khandav, the rescue of Maya by Arjun, and the escape of the serpent, and the begetting of a son by that best of rishis, Mandalapada, in the womb of the bird Sarangi. This parva is divided by Vyasa into 227 chapters. These 227 chapters contain 8,884 shlokas. The second is the extensive parva called Sabha or the assembly, full of matter. The subjects of this parva are the establishment of the grand hall by the Pandavas, their review of their retainers, the description of the Lokpals by Narad, well acquainted with the celestial regions, the preparation for the Rajsuya sacrifice, the destruction of Jarasandh, the deliverance by Vasudev of the princes confined in the mountain pass, the campaign of universal conquest by the Pandavas, the arrival of princes at the Rajsuya sacrifice with tribute, the destruction of Shishupal on the occasion of the sacrifice in connection with the offering of the Arghya, Bhimsena's ridicule of Duryodhan in the assembly, Duryodhan's sorrow and envy at the sight of the magnificent scale on which the arrangement had been made, the indignation of Duryodhan in consequence, and the preparations for the game of dice. The defeat of Yudhishthir at the play by a wily Shakuni, the deliverance by Dhritarashtra of his afflicted daughter in law, Draupadi, plunged in a sea of distress caused by the gambling, as of a boat tossed about by the tempestuous waves, the endeavors of Duryodhan to engage Yudhishthir again in the game, and the exile of the defeated Yudhishthir with his brothers. These constitute what has been called by the great Vyasa the Sabha Parv. This Parv is divided into 78 sections. O best of Brahmanas, of 2,507 slokas. Then comes the third parv called the Aranyaka, relating to the forest. This parva treats of the vending of the Pandavas, the forest, and the citizens, following the wise Yudhishthir's adoration of the god of the day. According to the injunctions of Dhyuma, to be gifted with the power of maintaining the dependent Brahmanas with food and drink, the creation of food to the grace of sun, the expulsion of Dhritarashtra by Dhritarashtra of Vidur, who always spoke of his master's good, Vidura's coming to the Pandavas and his return to Dhritarashtra at the solicitation of the latter, the wicked Duryodhan's plottings to destroy the forest ranging Pandavas, being incited thereto by Karan, the appearance of Vyasa and his dissuasion of Duryodhan's bent on going to the forest, the history of Surabhi, the arrival of Maitreya, his laying down to Dhritarashtra the course of action, and his curse on Duryodhan, Bhima's slaying of Kirmira in battle, the coming of the Panchals and the princes of the Vrishni race to Yudhishthir on hearing of his defeat at an unfair gambling by Shakuni, Dhananjaya's allaying the wrath of Krishna, Draupadi's lamentations before Madhav, Krishna's cheering her, and the fall of Sova also has been here described by the rishis. Also, Krishna's bringing Subhadra with her son to Dwarka, and Drishtadamnu's bringing the son of Draupadi to Panchal. The entrance of the sons of Pandu into the romantic Dwaita wood, conversations of Bhima, Yudhishthir, and Draupadi, the coming of Vyasa to the Pandavas, and his enjoying Yudhishthir with the power of Smriti. Then, after the departure of Vyasa, the removal of the Pandavas to the forests of Kamakya, the wandering of Arjun of immeasurable prowess in search of weapons, his battle with Mahadev in the guise of a hunter, his meeting with the Lokpals and receipt of weapons from them, his journey to the regions of Indra for arms and the consequent anxiety of Dhritarashtra. The wailings and lamentations of Yudhishthir on the occasion of his meeting with the wonderful sage Brihadvasa. Here comes the holy and the highly pathetic story of Nala, illustrating the patience of Damayanti and the character of Nal. Then the acquirement by Yudhishthir of the mysteries of dice from the great sages. Then the arrival of the Rishi Lomasa from the heavens to where the Pandavas were, and the receipt by these highly souled dwellers in the woods of the intelligence brought by the rishis of their brother Arjun, living in the heavens. Then the pilgrimage of the Pandavas to various sacred spots in accordance with the message of Arjun, and their attainment of great merit and virtue consequent on such pilgrimage. Then the pilgrimage of the great sage Narad to the shrine Putasta, and also the pilgrimage of the high souled Pandavas. Here is the deprivation of Karan of his earrings by Indra. Here also is the recitation, the sacrificial magnificence of Gaya. Then the story of Agastya, in which the rishis ate up the Asura Vatapi and his connubial connection with Lopamudra from the desire of offspring. Then the story of Rishi Asirgya, who adopted brahmacharya mode of life from his very boyhood. Then the history of Rama of great prowess, the son of Jamadagni, in which has been narrated the death of Kratavirya and the Hayhayas. Then the meeting between the Pandavas and the Vrishnis in the sacred spot called Prabhasa. Then the story of Sukanya, in which Chayavan, the son of Brigu, made the twins Ashwins drink at the sacrifice of King Saryati, the Som juice, from which they had been excluded by the other gods, in which besides is shown how Chayavan himself acquired perpetual youth as a boon from the grateful Ashwins. Then had been described the history of the king Mandata, then the history of the prince Jantu, and how King Sumaka, by offering up his only son Jantu in sacrifice, obtaining 100 others. Then the excellent history of the hawk and the pigeon. Then the examination of the king Sivi by Indra, Agni, and Dharma. Then the story of Akshavakra, in which occurs the disputation and the sacrifice of Janak between the rishi and the first of logicians, Vandi, the son of Varun, the defeat of Vandi by the great Ashtavakra, and the release by Rishi of his father from the depths of the ocean. With this, we come to an end to this episode of Mahabharat and its heroes. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is your host, Madhulika Rajahan, signing off. Stay healthy always. Narayan, Narayan.